Welcome to today's episode of Culinary Curiosity with Chef Duane Thompson. I welcome you today, and we're going to be doing something that I've had a bit of time working on. I first started this a good 35 years ago, and it was a spur of the moment. It was a moment of curiosity that almost was my undoing. But what we're going to be doing today is deboning a chicken, a whole chicken, taking all the bones out of it. And I think it's good to know. I think education and knowledge is just good on its own. If you ever choose to do this, then here are some skills and some tips that I want to share with you. If it's just something that's very interesting to you and you know you're never going to do that, I still hope you enjoy this episode. Now, what I've done today is I've opened up a whole chicken out of its package, and what you're supposed to get in the little bag, or if it's in the cavity or if it's in the neck, is the internal organs and the neck. So we did do that today. We got the gizzard, we got the neck, and we got the livers. But this interesting bird must have had 2 hearts because that's what came in the bag. Now, it would be easy for me to have just taken that out and showed that it was only supposed to be 1 heart in there. But you know, this is reality. If you were to open up your chicken and you were to find 2 hearts, you might say, his didn't have 2 hearts, why does mine? So I think it's just a really good point to see mishaps occur. Now, maybe this is something that you would want to eat. So as far as the gizzards go, the hearts, the livers, those are definitely things you can saute up. As far as the neck goes, I always use that as stock. So that's something I keep. And if you don't want these items to make a snack or a meal, if you were to save them up from various chickens, this could be fed, like in my case, to our German Shepherds. They love treats like this. But what we're going to do today is look about how to debone this chicken and some tips that's going to make it hopefully easy and interesting to you. Now again, I want to go back to, when did this occur? When did I find this an interesting thing? A good 35 years ago, I was watching PBS, their culinary shows on Saturday. I'm sure if you are all of a certain age or of interest, it's things you've done before too. And it was either Julia Child or it was Jacques Pepin who showed how to debone a chicken. And I think it was actually Julia Child who did this because she showed what she did with it afterwards. But they went ahead and showed that, and I saw that early afternoon one Saturday, and I thought to myself, I'm going to do that. So I got on the phone and I called about 7 or 8 people to come over to the house for dinner that evening, and we were going to have deboned fowl. Now, I say fowl because, of course, the larger the bird, a turkey, is somewhat easier to debone because it's so much bigger. You can kind of work around it. A chicken is a good medium size creature that you can get into and still work it around. But not me. I think I'd lost any sense of good common sense that day. And I went ahead and got some Cornish game hens, you know, the really small ones that you can get that are individually packaged. I went and bought 4 of those and decided that my first time to ever do this, long before culinary school, I would just do that and we would have this for dinner. It would be fantastic. Boy, I bit off more than I could chew. That said, I persevered, stuck with it. Defeat was not a choice, and I deboned 4 Cornish game hens, and everyone got a half of one, and it was a bigger meal, so you might say, well, that wasn't very much to feed someone. Everybody was fed very well, but it was just a little ridiculous. So if you're going to do this, don't go smaller on your first time. Either stay with the chicken or go bigger if it's a turkey. I can promise you it's a lot easier. So what we have here is just a basic chicken you get at the store. You can be asking yourself, why would I want to do this? And again, we talked about having knowledge, that's fine. But let me talk about the economy of it all. Chicken breast, where I'm living right now, can be anywhere from $1.29 to $1.50 to $2. Even upwards in some of the higher end grocery stores, $2.50 a pound. Whereas you can find very easily on any given day a whole chicken at 99 cents a pound. Matter of fact, I get this one at a high-end market that if they had already done the butchering for you, then it's going to be around $2–2.50 a pound on it. So there is an economy to knowing this. So it's not just, you know, fun to know, but I think it can help for a budget. And we all need a budget. If we can save a little bit of money here and there, we can spend it in other areas. But let's talk about the anatomy of the chicken. I will assume that there's certain parts of the chicken that you absolutely know. That would be the drumstick, or the thigh, or the breast. I think we all know that. Maybe a little bit farther down would be the wings. So this is the chicken. If it was standing up, these would be the wings. This would be where the neck is and the head would be. So just getting an understanding. And we're going to be taking a lot of the bones off. And what you really have here is a large carcass that has an opening to it. It's an open up carcass, and you can just cut the meat away from that. And these other bones are the ones that we're going to worry about really deboning. We're just taking the meat away from the other. Now on these wings, the first thing I want you to do is realize that when the wing has a joint, that is a natural spot to cut it. So you can come under the wing and then pop it a little bit, and then it really just comes off on its own. And that's what I'm going to put over here for stock. I'm going to do the same with this one. Again, just cut into it. It's going to pop a little bit. And try your best not to be squeamish. I know this isn't the first time I've done this. I've been doing this a long time. But at the end of the day, it's just understanding anatomy. And if you look at it maybe from a little bit more of a scientific approach than an ooh approach, I think it'll be okay. So one area of the bird that I am going to assume that you do not know about is the back side, where the very best part of the chicken is. So again, if we're thinking about that this would be the bird standing up, the very best part of this animal, in my opinion, are what we call the oysters. And it's going to be at the lower part of the back. Here's the thighs and the legs. And these two little humps are little pieces of meat. They're round, and they're setting in a concave bone on each side. So you have these nice little pieces of meat that resemble an oyster. And so they're obviously not real oysters, but it's this beautiful, tender piece of meat. And you know, that's just the best part. So if those can be stolen from the Thanksgiving turkey or stolen from the Sunday roasted chicken, that's the part you want to steal. But this is where we're going to begin. So we're going to start this by just cutting down the back. So at the beginning of the episode, you saw me that I was sharpening my knife. I think it's very important to have a very sharp knife in the kitchen. And the sharpener that I use is one that I found from the America's Test Kitchen, that they said it was the best one that you could buy. Not necessarily the most expensive, but it really was the best. So I went ahead and bought that, and I've never looked back. I think it's a fantastic knife sharpener. Now, the knife in question that we're using is a boning knife. And this knife is very thin, it's very narrow, and it's very pointed. So it is something that you want to use when you're deboning any pieces of meat. Now, there are two types of boning knives. You have a rigid one, which this is. So you see I can bend it a little bit, but it is not as flexible as the flexible boning knife. And the flexible boning knife can really bend all the way here. Those are used mostly on fish. But these, because they're more rigid, they're used on other animals. Ducks, geese, beef, anything like that, pork. And oftentimes in actual butchering, the knife, the boning knife, is held more like this, and you see that the butcher is using it like this. Now in the kitchen, you rarely are ever going to hold a knife like this if you're deboning any meat, but it's something that you just need to know that that's the way it should be held whenever you're taking large bones out. But what we're going to do is we're going to hold it like this, and we're going to use the point of the knife more than we're going to use the entire edge of the knife. So in knife skills, when you understand how to use a knife, you do your best to hold the knife and you move it in a rocking manner, and you try to use as much as the blade as possible. In boning, you don't often do that. You use the tip to the first part of it more often than not. So what we're going to do is now focus more on this chicken and bone. And I am going to just say that you take your knife and you find where the center is. Well, where do you find the center? You just look at it and you pick a spot that looks like it's dividing it half in two. Don't get so worried about this. Maybe you hear that. You don't go very deep into it because there's not very much flesh there. So don't be concerned on that. You could go, well, he's over here cutting this off and I don't even know if I'm having a problem because I just barely got into it. Well, that's fine. So we're gonna go back to these oysters, and I'm going to, because it's a concave, I'm gonna get my knife in there and try to get underneath it so I'm following the bone to release that little piece of meat. So I find it and I go into it. I come on the other side and I'm just releasing the flesh away from the bone. And I know you're saying to yourself, boy, he's making that sound easy. Don't be intimidated by it. Just do it, and you're gonna realize real quick that the more you take away, the more it's just gonna come off. And you go, well, I'm hitting bone. Well, you don't go all the way through because you're not cutting it in half. You start following the contour of the animal's body. So see, I've already got that open, and I'm taking little bites. And as long as I am staying as close to the skeleton, the carcass, then it's all going to come off. So I'm going to do maybe a little bit less talking right now and a little bit more showing of what this method is. Now, right here, there is a bone. How do I know it? Because I can feel it. There's something in there. So there's a bone. We have it on both sides, and I actually do not know what the name of this bone is. I was showing this technique to a friend of mine, and I think she said it was a clavicle bone. I don't have a clue. I just know it's kind of sticking out there, and what you saw me do is that I just went into the meat, took off that bone, and I'm just cutting the flesh from around it. And there's a certain point where it just comes off, and you put it over here with your stock bones. Now, what I have in the front of this, or actually it's going to be the bottom of the chicken, is this thigh bone. The thigh bone is connected here to this carcass, and I know the minute I said that, everybody started thinking about the song, about the thigh bone connected to, well, I'm not going to sing that. But what I want you to see is this joint. And you just simply have to move it around, and this is something you need to do, is just extend it where there's a little bit of a snap. And as soon as you can get that snapped, then you're able to come in there and disconnect it to or from the carcass. And what I have right here is now this thigh is removed from the carcass. Okay? Now I want you to be able to see this very nicely. See, that's now disconnected. That used to be right there. And then I have this meat here that I'm just going to start slowly going against the bone until I see a disconnection spot. So here is the drumette from the wing, and it's connected to the back as well. And I see that there's the joint. That joint is the spot where I can disconnect it from itself. And it's always good to have a little snap in there, and you just get your finger in there and you feel it. You cut in between that joint, and then it comes off. There you go. Now that's completely off. Now you see, this is the meat this is the bone, this is the meat. They're now disconnected from one another. So there's a ton of bones in this middle section. We're not going to worry about that. We're just getting the meat away from the carcass. And as long as you continue to scrape, you're going to be able to remove these items from the carcass. Now, right here we have the ribs coming out. We go on the outside because we're leaving that alone and we're taking the meat with us. And as you get closer and closer, you're going to be going from the breast to the tenderloin. You don't need to worry about what those names are. It's not relevant. That if you keep this very tightly against the carcass, it's all going to come off. What if I was to cut directly into this meat and slice it? Not a thing. It's okay. Don't let that be any level of worry to you. We have a rib here. I can feel, actually that's part of the wishbone. I felt it there. I just cut between the meat and the wishbone, and one half of that wishbone came right on off. That's going to go in the stock pot. And if you were to happen to miss a little bone, or you were to have some cartilage left in it, don't worry about it. You can go back at the end and take that off. It's not a problem. But I do want you to realize that once you get to the bottom side, you know, where you've cut half of it off, that's when you have to flip the chicken over and start doing exactly what you did here on this other side. Now we're going to do the exact same thing to the other side. Just going to go in there and start slicing away. Little parts will start separating. Trying to do it where you can see, but there's a chance I'm going to be getting in the way. So hopefully you can still see this. I try my best. So I'm here at the oyster. I'm feeling that that bone is there, and I'm just taking the knife and cutting into it. I'm taking it all the way to the neck. I'm slowly just taking my knife, just doing this kind of a motion. Now, the first side is always the easiest, and the second side is always a little bit harder because you just don't have as much structure. It's a little bit more flexible here, but it's really not that hard. And I know it's easier said than done, and I appreciate that the first time you do this, it's going to be a little nerve-wracking. But at the end of the day, you really can't mess it up. And you say, well, I can mess up anything. Well, give yourself a little bit more credit than that. So I have that bone here that I want to just feel and cut out. And if I turn my knife, I'm moving myself where if that knife was to slip, it's not going to hit me. And I cut it, and this goes right to the drumette. And that just pops right on off, literally. Sometimes you just have to help it a little bit more. There we go. Felt there was a tendon there. So that goes over to that pile. And I'm just coming in here with my knife, slicing. And what should I be finding over here? The other part of the wishbone. It's going to show up in just a second. It's there. You say, well, whenever I did it, I didn't find it. You eventually did. You're going to feel around and you're going to find every little bone in here. This is so different than fish. You know, if you've ever cut fish or eaten fish and those little tiny bones are there, chickens don't have them near that many nor that small. So you just touch the meat all around, you go, okay, there's no bones there any longer. If there are, you find them, you cut the meat from around it, and you put it over in the pile for stock. So what do we have here? We have the thigh that's connected to the carcass, and I'm going to find that joint, come in here, whoops, there it is, just as plain as day. And that comes right on off beautifully. And there's another bone right there. Gonna cut around that. And what we're finding here is the other side of that wishbone. I can feel it right in there. We all know what a wishbone looks like. So just imagine what the shape is as you're cutting it out. You go, okay, it's got that curvature to it. And I've left that there. I've separated it from the meat. And you see that this is kind of emerging to just come right on off. Now I'm taking time discussing this with you. I'm trying to get angles here for the shot so that you can see things. But if you think about it, this really hasn't taken an awful lot of time. I taught this past Saturday someone who had never done this before, and we were just taking it casually and we were taking it slowly, and she asked questions, and by the time we were done in a very casual way, she took about 30 minutes to do it. When I'm not doing this on camera and I'm able to do it at the house, it takes me about 15 minutes. And I don't rush it. There's no reason to go crazy going really fast. You got a knife in your hand, you need to respect that knife. You don't want to hurt yourself at all. And you just do it right. One big thing on culinary school, you don't cut yourself. If you did, you had to pay a penalty. It was a 10-page report on knife safety. Nobody wanted to do that. That was like the absolute worst thing. And what have I done? I just found that center part, and I've now separated the carcass from the chicken. And that's what this is. I'm going to put this over here. Now really, what we have is a mostly deboned chicken. We only have 3 bones left on this chicken. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of bring it back together. We have a leg bone, we have a thigh bone, and we have a drumette, or the upper part of the wing. Those are the only 3 bones that are left. This chicken, you could say, okay, I've done enough, this is good enough, I can work through having a leg bone or a thigh bone. Okay, that's fine. If that's where you wanted to stop, that's fine. But you're watching, so let's talk about how to get this. Now, the thigh bone to me is the absolute easiest bone. It's one single straight bone going. Now, from the thigh to the leg is where it's connected. You see this layer of fat? This is the top of the leg and the bottom of the thigh. And really, if you just go right into where that fatty part is, you're gonna find that connection. Now, what I do on this end is I cut into the bone. You're really not going deep into it, but I'm just severing the flesh from the bone. And then I can just scrape it down. You go, oh, I'm not sure if I can do it. Sure you can. I have no worries that you can accomplish this. Now, there's the connection of the leg and the thigh right there. And again, when you have a joint, you just simply want to get into it, cut it out, and that's the thigh bone. Now, we have only the leg bone left. We can see where the leg bone is interior and exterior, and we can just simply go right where the bone is and start slicing down. We've cut the skin away. We're cutting this away. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the chicken leg and I'm going to go to where this end is, and I'm going to kind of cut around it. And again, I'm just trying to separate the meat from the cartilage and the bone. And as long as you're holding it well here, it's very simple. Just cut around it, and see what you have left. Now, you're really familiar with this bone. Everybody's eaten a chicken leg in their life, or most everybody. and you know how to hold it. You know when you're eating it, what it feels like, what it looks like. Just remember that part of it. And now I'm going to take the inside part of the leg, and I'm going to start scraping. I feel like that the meat is still attached. See, I just cut it and it just fell right on off, didn't it? It's just a scraping. Now, when you get to the very end, what you do is kind of pull it out a bit, and you're just going to cut it away. And this is your leg bone that you have. There's a little bit of meat right there. I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to put it right in here. Put that over there. And what you have is a completely deboned. I'm over here touching everything. Is there any cartilage left? Yep, there is right there. It's really good to know. It was easy to find. Just going to cut into that cartilage. I feel it. And it is gone. So we've taken the entire bottom part. I'm going to reconstruct it so you know what we have here. We have the leg that is this part and the thigh that is this part. Now we have the drumette. Now just pretend that this is something that is just like the drumstick. You come in here around at the top and you cut it, and you're just simply separating the flesh from the bone by cutting around it. Just that simple. I'm not breaking a sweat. I'm not over anxious. I'm just doing it. Then you scrape it. And if it's not going well, cut it again. Cut that meat off. And then at one point, you know you're at the end. You cut that off. This is the drumette. So what we have is now half of this chicken is absolutely and completely deboned. We're going to do the same thing on this side. It gives you another chance to look at this thigh bone. And in this case, you can see that there's a little fat vein, or a channel of fat. It's not a vein, but it's where you see that this is really where the bone is as well, right? I cut right into it and there was the bone. Now, trust the chicken and these fat lines. These fat lines usually are showing where the separation of one segment goes to another segment. So I was able to fill that right there. I've just cut into it and mostly taken that joint apart. Now I'm coming to the top of it and I'm cutting the meat away from the bone. Goes into it, cut it, and scrape it. And I'm just taking that apart from one another. And there's the thigh bone. That goes there. I go back to my leg. And the leg is right there, that straight part. Getting right to that bone. I'm gonna come around this top part. I'm gonna hold the chicken leg just like I would if I was eating it. Okay, when I feel like I've gone all the way around and severed the meat and any tendons that are there, I hold that up in the top and I just hold it and scrape it down. Pulls out a bit. At that stage, I cut through the skin, and then there's the chicken leg. Now for the very last bone, we're going to this drumette. It's over on this side. And I'm cutting the top around, taking that, I'm holding it just like I would the chicken leg. Come in here, I cut around, I cut around. And then I come to the top. I can feel that there's a little bit more meat or tendon right there. You just separate that out nicely. So I can get my fingers around it. Now if it's really hard, you get your fingers on it, then go in there and get that flesh off of it a bit. Cut it, take it down a little bit. It's all okay. See, I haven't even come close to cutting myself. famous last words. But I'm keeping my hands just completely away from the knife. The knife is going usually away from me. And this chicken is now completely deboned. Let's see it again. We have where the drumettes were. We have where the legs were, the thighs, and the breasts. And this is now a completely deboned chicken. Now, I'm going to have another video of what I'm planning on doing with this chicken, but let me give you a few pointers. What we often love to do in our family is I'll get the grill going, get really nice temperature, and I will come in and cut butterfly into this meat and open it up a bit so it's less thick, okay? And I'm going to go towards the center section so it just covers that up. And this, I cut out a little bit more and move it. And see, that's nice and flat. And I'll do the same on this side. Just take a little slice, move it off, and another slice there, kind of make it into an envelope, if you will. That's nicely opened up. And we have this meat here. Now, what I like to do is I would season this, salt and pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, you know, anything you would like as far as flavoring goes. And then I'll go get the grill heated up nicely. The charcoal is nice and whited out, red hot. Maybe a couple pieces of cherry wood or a tiny piece of mesquite. And I'll go out there and I'll start grilling this. And I'll grill the bottom side, grill the top side, get it, and you're gonna be really surprised how quickly, without bones, this is gonna cook. Now, when we're doing that, I will have already taken a couple of onions, a couple of green bell peppers or some poblano peppers, any kind of pepper that you would like, and saute that up in the skillet so that when this is 95% finished, right? So it's really done. You just have a couple more minutes. I'm gonna come in and put this on a tray from outside and put all the sauteed onions with garlic in it, the peppers, and probably take a nice Oaxaca cheese or a Monterey Jack cheese and put that on top, and then let this finish off for 5 or 10 minutes in a really hot oven, 400 degrees, 425. Let that melt in there, and you can put that on a beautiful platter, take it out, and all you have to do is just start slicing. There's no bones to be interfering with this. You can do this well in advance. Once you take the bones off, if it's just 2 of you in the house, cut this in half. Take each part, put it in a vacuum seal, put them in the freezer, have them ready. You know, go buy a couple of these whole 99-cent chickens and do 3 or 4 of them at once. You would then be able to just put them back in the freezer. Again, vacuum seal is what I like because it keeps everything so wonderful. And then you can pull it out for as few or as many people as you would like. Now with these bones, we're gonna have a stock video coming out very soon using these. And so if you're not prepared to make stock, then the first thing you would want to do is just get these, put them in a Ziploc type bag, and put them in the freezer, and they will last for many, many months until you get enough of them to make a nice large amount of stock. So what we have here is some meat that's ready to be either put in the freezer, to be cooked immediately, or to do some more things with it. So we're going to end this episode here because the next one will be how to cook this in a new way that I've never done before because I'm curious about it. And then we'll have a stock session. And so we're getting quite a bit out of this one endeavor. And trust me, whenever you make your own stock, that is the best thing you can do. I do not use canned chicken stock at all. I just think this is so much better. And we'll get into that deeper, but let me tell you, you've already paid for this as well, so you might as well use it. So I have some wonderful ideas that you can do. You can either make it and freeze it or make it and can it. I do all of mine pressure can just because I have the equipment, but if you don't worry. There's many ways to just freeze it in portions, put it in your freezer, and you can pull that out at any time for a fantastic addition to your dinner. I hope I've made this where it's understandable. I hope I've taken a little bit of the mystery out of it. Maybe there was no mystery because you never thought to do something like this. But that's the curiosity of this. What would I do with this? Why would I want to? Economy, interest, knowledge, making it easier for the people who are coming and dining in your home. This is so much nicer. You don't have to worry about bones whatsoever. A lot of restaurants in the olden days worried a lot about people using bones and not being cumbersome with it, or it's maybe a little tacky if you're on a date. You know, you don't go and eat ribs too much because it gets messy and the bones are just too much to deal with. But this is much more refined and beautiful, and I think it's just a fun way to deal with it. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I would love for you to put some comments below and tell me what you think about it. Thank you.